I'm Hadar Susskind. I'm the president and CEO of New Jewish Narrative. I want to introduce our guests, our friends. Many of you I know them already and have for a long time. I will start off with Lior Amihai. Lior is the executive director of Shalom Achshav, of Peace Now in Israel, and a longtime friend of the show, as we say. And an even longer time friend of the show is Hagit Ofran, the co-director of Peace Now's Settlement Watch. I'm going to skip the long and impressive bios from both of them because I know you guys know them. So with that, I will just remind you again, please use the Q&A button. We're here today because so much has been going on in Israel, in Gaza, in the West Bank, with the politics, with the protests, with everything else. With tariffs, your Manischewitz wine and matzah just got more expensive yesterday, although we don't have to talk about that. But we wanted to talk about all of these things, and we wanted to bring in the people who, more than anybody else, really have their thumb on the pulse of what's happening and what's going on, and can share that with us. So I'm going to start, Lior, with you. Please, take it away. Tell us what is going on, man.
Well, thank you very much, Hadar, and everyone at the New Jewish Narrative, former APN. So thank you for inviting us and hosting us and supporting our work for so long. It's really meaningful and giving us the opportunity to speak here and introduce ourselves and mainly our work. So thank you very much for doing all of this. For those who don't know me, so my name is Lior. I'm the executive director of Peace Now for the past 2 years or so. I was in Peace Now. Before that, I was working with Hagit and the Settlement Watch program for quite some time, about 5 years. And I've also been the executive director of Yesh, a human rights organization. And I'm living in Tel Aviv with 3 kids, and really an honor to be here. So we thought of doing this webinar. Adar thought of this, and we thought it was a great idea to share some of our insights about this hectic period that we're working in, that we're living in, and some of the work that we're doing. The background or context, the immediate background and context of where we are right now includes first and foremost war, and a very harsh war, a war with over 50,000 Palestinians dead, widespread destruction, alongside with Israeli hostages who are being held in torment and facing life-threatening conditions. So this is the general context. In parallel to that, if that is not enough, there is a judicial coup that is sort of in its second phase right now, with attempts to remove the head of the Shin Bet, the Attorney General, alongside anti-democratic legislation. This, the first phase was until the 7th of October. It never really stopped, but it was halted for quite some time, and now it's being renewed on steroids, in really quickly, very rapidly, very forcefully, while war is happening and being escalated. The third sort of thing that is happening is that just now, like in recent weeks, there's a security scandal that is grabbing most of the headlines, though not necessarily the public outrage, not yet, or not to the extent one would think, which is raising suspicions that Qatar has spoken. Qatar, the same country that has funded Hamas, that paid Hamas money, in the one that was the contact person with Hamas under the negotiations. This same Qatar is also funded spokespeople in the Prime Minister's office in Israel to improve its public relations in Israel, to promote its standings before the US, to harm the standing of Egypt. So this is sort of like a big security scandal that is happening in the background. And sorry, what?
And who knows what else they're funding for?
And who knows what else? Exactly. This is sort of being revealed as we speak. Now, amid all of this madness, there is what Israel is doing in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem. And this is annexation on steroids, alongside pogroms, Jewish terrorism that is carried out by settlers with the cooperation of the army and the police. Now, this is really, this is the context. And each one of these things could provide, I don't know, a lifelong drama, definitely a movie, a book, whatever. And this is happening all at the same time. And I must say that I'm really proud to be the executive director of Peace Now during this time, when we, Peace Now, and with Hagit, of course, at the forefront of exposing the information of what Israel is doing in the territories at the moment in regards to the settlement, in regards to the occupation. Anyone who's been following us and has seen that we've produced dozens of reports, if not over hundreds, in the past 2 years, on what the government has been doing in the occupied territories during this time. Because there are so many crises that are happening, so many dramas, but this drama, the one with the annexation and the settlements, is the one that they're succeeding in the most, and the one that is getting the least attention of all these dramas. And that is, of course, the annexation and the expulsion of the Palestinians from their territories. Now, I'm really proud to work with Hagit Ofran and Yonatan Mizrahi, who is the other co-director of Settlement Watch, who's not here at the moment. But they're exposing the unimaginable number of outposts that this government has established during the war, like mushrooms after rain. I think the figures, Hagit will correct me, were nearly an outpost a week in the first year of the war, about 70 outposts throughout the time. So huge, significant amount of illegal outposts, illegal roads that they broke, that harmed the livelihood of Palestinians. The massive budget that this government is transferring into settlements and outposts, something that Hagit has been working closely on, and this is all being transferred, to Israeli politicians and decision makers and journalists to show them that the budget, Israel is in a financial crisis. There's war, and still the settlements are getting much, much more, and their budgets are increasing. And there's so many other things going on, and this is all being reported. And so whoever is not following us and wants to know the details and what's going on, please do follow our information that we're sending, that Hagit is writing most of it. Now, the reason sort of for today's discussion is one of the bigger and more important reports that were written in recent years. It was written by Hagit alongside Dror Etkes from Kerem Navot organization, which really reveals information about the extent of the land that was seized by these outposts, by these what we call the farm or agricultural outposts, and the direct government involvement and funding to these outposts. And of course, the consequence to the Palestinians. So this is like the direct reason or incentive to sort of share with you this report. It was featured, I think, a week ago or 2 weeks ago on CNN. We haven't actually released it to the public quite yet. So hopefully we'll do it tomorrow or early next week. So you're getting sort of an insider's view before it's being published to the general crowd. So I want to hand it over to Hagit. But before that, I want to say something about hope. And that is beyond the importance of the work that's being done by Settlement Watch, by Peace Now at this moment. I want to tell you that the public in Israel is demonstrating very hard and for very, very long, 5, 6 years of demonstrations. And these are not Peace Now-led demonstrations, certainly not. But they're really embracing Peace Now. When we're standing there together, shoulder to shoulder, they're hugging us. They're liking our work. They're sharing and they're shouting our messages. We could only have wished that they would have shouted these messages 10, 15 years ago. They're shouting them now. This is like the messages that are being shouted they're disgusted by the far right. They are seeing the illegitimacy and the foreign interests that are driving this war and the failure to return the hostages. So this is, we're not at the forefront, but our messaging is definitely there. But with that, and perhaps I'll stop here, and without further ado, I'll just hand it over to Hagit, which will share with much greater detail and insight. Thank you.
Before we get to Hagit, I'm going to sneak in for a second. Thank you, Lior. I want to note again, just quickly for everybody, one, please don't raise your hand. Use the Q&A if you want to submit questions. Also, in the chat, I just posted the link. Hopefully, you saw that CNN story that Lior mentioned about the report that Hagit co-authored. We shared it over email. And in response to that, our board member, Louis Leiner, has offered an amazing $20,000 matching grant to help directly support the work of Shalom Achshav. So if you are so inclined, you can find in the chat the link to give a gift there. Your gift will be doubled. That impact will be doubled. So please take a look at the link. If you have follow-up questions or you don't remember getting that email and seeing the report and you want to see it, shoot us an email. You can email us at info@newjewishnarrative.org, and we will happily share it with you. And with that,
then I'll squeeze in and say again, thank you, especially to Louis, but to you for all the fundraising. This is really meaningful for our work and enabling us to do this. So thank you, Louis, and thank you, APN and NGN and New Jewish Narrative. Thank you for all of this.
Thanks, Lior. Okay, Hagit, tell us the good news.
The good news.
Sorry.
Yeah, I always try to include in my talks something optimistic or hopeful, and I promise to do that also today. But the situation is very depressing. This year, as Lior said, and the war and this government made settlers pretty much feel that they have no limits at all. Not that they had so many before, but now it's like breaking more and more red lines that we've never seen, and it's on the ground, what we see is a huge change in the West Bank. I would say we managed to expose and to analyze the annexation that is ongoing now. That the actually it's a tremendous or fundamental change of the way Israel is managing the West Bank from the military control to civil control to that is directly reporting to this government. And this was exposed in the front page story on the New York Times based on recording that my colleague managed to get and to analyze. And what we see on the ground with this big change, and I tell you, I encourage you to go and read our report about this changes, which is a little bureaucratic, but the outcome of these changes are very much seen on the ground. So I would like to show you something that settler. Oh, I need to ask you to share the screen. I have only 2 slides to show you. A settler who's active in the farm outposts put out few days ago. His name is Elisha Yered, and what he's saying in this post is the following: there is nothing like hearing about yet another Arab invasion outpost that has left the area, about another piece of land that has returned to Jewish hands. But have you ever thought about how much effort it took to make this happen? He's bragging about yet another deportation, expulsion of Palestinian community from the West Bank or within the West Bank by violent settlers. And it's there. I mean, I can show you additional of those kind of posts that those settlers put out. They are very explicit about what they're doing. They are systematically expelling the Palestinians from the area. And the other slide I wanted to show you is this map, which is like the biggest. Oh no, I don't know if the biggest. We have like 3 main chapters to our report, which is called The Bad Samaritan. And this map, you can see the West Bank, and in red is all the land that we, mainly Kerem Navot, Dror Etkes, mapped. All this land in red, which is 14% of the West Bank, 14% of the West Bank, is now under full control of violent settlers, and Palestinians has almost no access to those lands anymore. And if you can see in my screen also the yellow dots, there are over 60 yellow dots in the map of Palestinian communities that were displaced by due to the violent settlers. So it is dramatic change. I can take you around the West Bank to areas where 2 years ago you would see Palestinian communities, Palestinian shepherds in their lands, walking around, cultivating their land. And now what you see is only settler shepherds. Land that was cultivated now is not cultivated at all. And I can also take you to many places where you can see that people used to live, and now it's empty, broken homes, because they had to leave because of the attacks and harassments and threats and physical assaults by violent settlers. So that is one chapter of our report. I mean, I think it's showing how far they managed to go. And I think in the last 2 years, they managed to take over most of this land. I mean, they started before. There were about 200,000 dunams that they controlled 2 years ago, and now there are almost 800,000 dunams. And as we speak, they take over more and more and establish additional farming outposts, shepherding outposts, which are those places where settlers settle, and from there they start to take over of the land. The second chapter of this report is about the assistance they get from the government in terms of land allocation. One of the secret or confidential issues in the West Bank is the way that the government is managing the land. And it's confidential because what Israel is doing is actually taking over a lot of land officially and then giving it to settlers. And without, public tenders, bids, without due process, and without any transparency. Actually, we have 2 court cases that are demanding that those allocations will be public. We have some successes. I mean, the court ordered the government to publish some of those allocations, and we are still fighting for the other ones.
Did they do it? I know the court ordered them to do it, but did the government actually publish them?
Yes. Now, what we have already is that now when they want to allocate land, they need to publish it. And we saw about a month ago, for the first time ever, we saw a publication of the intention to allocate a few thousands of dunams to shepherds. And we published this intention, and now there are Palestinians that can appeal against it because now it's public, and now they can try to fight against it. We will see what will come of it. But this success was only to direct governmental allocations. We are still fighting for the allocations that are done by the settlement division, which is part of, it's officially part of the World Zionist Organization, but it's actually a unit that is funded by the Israeli government, and it's a unit that is meant to assist the settlements. And I find this issue fascinating, but it's quite complicated. How they manage the land, how the authorities gave this body, this non-governmental body, the management of most of the public land in the West Bank, and how they are actually using their power as managers of land to give it to settlers, and actually also give them land that they don't have authority to give. For instance, private Palestinian land that we saw they allocated for settlers and things of the sort. We wrote this year a thorough report or an explanation of what is the settlement division. And if you Google what is the settlement division, you can find on our website a thorough analysis of this body. And we are fighting for more transparency, or not more, they have none. So it's, transparency in their allocations. So, however, with all this introduction, what we managed to get, not directly, 20 allocation agreements that the settlement division gave settlers. Some of those settlers, we know them as settlers that were sanctioned by the US. Now they're not sanctioned anymore, but they're very violent and known as violent. And these allocations assist the settlers to, first of all, get official budgeting and support of the government, and also to have some piece of paper to show the commanders in the field that this is my land. I need this Palestinian is not allowed here, etc. It's not that they really need a paper, because they what we show is that according to what the government told the court in our case, the settlement division allocated 80,000 dunams to settlers for shepherding, but we see that the settlers took over 800,000 dunams. So we understand that these papers are not all what they take, and they took over a lot of private Palestinian land, even some land that is in Palestinian Authority responsibility according to the agreements, like Area B and even Area A. So we analyze those allocation contracts and show the way this mechanism works. And the third chapter in this report is about the funding.
Hey,
Yes.
pardon me,
Hadar.
but before you move on, I want to kind of I want to ask a couple of the things before we go on to the next piece. So first of all, I just want to note, we're going to come back to the settlement division in the World Zionist Organization in a minute, because obviously everybody who is on our list hopefully knows the World Zionist Congress elections are happening right now, and we're a part of that, and this is a good example of the impact. So I want to come back to that. But before that, there are a couple of questions that go together that are really about what you were just talking about, that maybe you can answer before we move on. So first was a question about the Palestinians who have been displaced by these settlers taking the land. Where are they? Have they gone to other parts of Area C or A or B? You know, when the government or the settlers, and whichever combination, comes in and pushes them out, where is it that they can go? And then with that, again, these are not exactly the same question, but they all, I think, connect. A question from our friend Ori Nir. Hi, Ori. wanting to know about the areas that have been taken over by the agricultural outposts, those in map. What's the legal status of those areas? And then practically speaking, what does it mean for those red dots? Are Palestinians not allowed to enter that? Is that enforced by the IDF? How is that working? And then maybe sort of slightly higher up question, you talked a number of times about the farm outposts and the shepherding, and the question about when did that become such a thing with the settlers? And it said, the person who asked it said, I thought most settlements were bedroom communities for commuters with jobs in pre-67 Israel. And so I'm going to smooshy all of those together and see if you can talk about those for a couple of minutes before we move to the
Okay, and I hope I will remember all your questions. The phenomena of those shepherding outposts started in 2017, more and 18. It's started, I believe, bottom up. Settler organizations, Amana specifically, assisted those outposts, and they systematically took over land. The way they do it is usually they threaten the Palestinians. It's not that the military has orders to kick out the Palestinians. It's done by the settlers. The military will support it, will assist them whenever there is any, friction or clashes. If the military arrives, then they will protect the settlers. That will be their automatic reaction. They are there to protect the settlers, but it is not official. Okay, it's just and the expulsion of communities. This started in, I think, July or August 2022. So it was before the war, before this government even, that we saw several communities that were, at the beginning, they were attacked while they're shepherding far from their house. But then the settlers felt more and more confident and started to raid the houses and threaten the family or beat up the women or whoever. And the Palestinian community said, okay, there is a testimony of the Palestinian there in this first community, Ras Etin, that is saying, I could handle the harassments while I was out in the fields shepherding. Okay, I would run away or whatever. But when it got to our home, when my wife was beaten up, I cannot stay here. Where do they go to? We're talking about shepherding communities. They live on their flocks of growing sheep, some cultivation of the land. They try to find alternative places to live. It's usually at the outskirts of Area B. Sometimes we saw them going to places in Area C, but even in outskirts of Area B, they are sometimes attacked. And they have a lot of problems because there are other communities there. They are already using land there. They need to get the owners to allow them. And some would end up renting in some town and lose all their livelihood and all the way they live traditionally. And that's a big problem for them. It's heartbreaking. but we're talking about thousands of people already. B'Tselem and Ocha are following those numbers. The last number I saw was over 1,600, and I think they don't have all the communities in their database. So it's a dramatic change. I would also want to mention that there are many Israelis that are going out to be with Palestinians, and they try to assist them to hang on. And I think they're doing amazing job. You know, many hundreds of volunteers and Israeli volunteers that in recent years started to go out. They do it weekly. They go out for a day in the field. Sometimes they sleep at night with the Palestinians, and they do it, you know, as volunteers to be there, to document, to be able to assist the Palestinians. They're doing amazing job. We are trying to assist them as much as we can with information and legal support and things of the sort. But if I said I would say some optimistic things, so one of the optimistic things I'm saying now is that we have now many hundreds of Israelis involved in this. And this means that there are more Israelis that hear about it, because you have more people that see it, and they bring more people to see it. And it's much, much more than the dozens that used to be several years ago. So I hope, Ori's question about the legality or the status of the land. We mapped the land that we saw that the settlers took, and we found out that less than half of it are considered by Israel as state land or public land. So the majority of this land, a little over 60%, or over 50, I'm sorry, is privately owned by Palestinians, but they are not allowed
Hagit, to put the
access
point
to
on,
it.
right, to put the point on that, that means that, you know, these settlement outposts that are taking that land are illegal even under Israeli law, right?
Yes, of course. I didn't mention that all those farms, technically, they are illegal even according to the Israeli law, because they have no planning and no permits for their construction to be there. So their structures are illegal. But they like to say that the settlers, and the government, it became a government project. And the way the government is talking about it is that they are protecting national land. So one could assume that they are talking about public land, or what the Israelis like to call state land, that is managed by the Israeli authorities. So if those Palestinians don't have a right to it, then we must maintain this land. We see that it's a bluff. I mean, even according to the Israeli authorities, what they take over any land. They take over private Palestinian land, and they take over state land or public land, and they take some areas in Area B and even in Area A, a little bit near Jericho. So it's a huge huge project. And when I say that it's a governmental project, I mentioned earlier the allocation of land, but the third chapter is our efforts to follow the money and to try to understand how they managed to do all this. And we managed to, I think, the dramatic change in the last couple of years, that we see dozens of outposts being established. As we said, this year, every week, there was a new outpost. This, I think, coming from direct budgeting that the government has given. This year is a budget of 75 million shekels that is going to illegal outposts. And the way that the government legalized the funding of illegal settlement is by funding the security components of those outposts. And this security components would include the cameras, electric gates, solar panels for electricity, and the construction of roads. The
All the
opening. What?
all of the infrastructure, really, or most of the infrastructure.
Most of the infrastructure, right? Because it's security. You need a road so that you can escape, or you can access, or you can the troops can come. So they pave the road, and then they put the outpost, and also they fund their cars. They ride those Rangers cars. The 2 weeks ago, Minister Strzok did like a photo op with 20 cars that she's giving, quote unquote, giving to those farms. And this means that they have government budgets that allows them to grow, and allows them to do what they are doing. There are other budgets. There is a budget in the Ministry of Agriculture for it's called the grazing grants, and we saw in the last few years 3 million shekels to shepherding shepherds. By the way, I think it was just after the election of Trump, before he canceled the sanctions, that the Ministry of Agriculture gave those grants to some sanctioned settlers before it was canceled. And there are also grants by the Settlement Division of the World Zionist Organization. There is funding for organizations that send volunteers to those farms, and those farms are based on a young couple, usually a family, with a few youngsters, usually youth, that couldn't find themselves in schools or at their homes, children that are having troubles, and they find places to live in those farms, and they are sent to graze the sheep alone in the hills of the West Bank. They do guarding at nights. They do all the work in the farm, and they also participate in the violent attacks against Palestinians. And we're talking about teenagers that are in those farms, and there are groups that manage this or fund them, make sure they have food, make sure they have places to sleep and all that. And those organizations get funds from the Ministry of Agriculture. So this is like, I think, the first time that we have a thorough picture of this phenomena of the government effort to kick out Palestinians from Area C systematically, and even without hiding it, by saying that this is what they're doing. And and I said I would say something optimistic. So I would, I want to say that I think that the polls show that the Israeli public is now, I think, now is the time that they most hate the violent settlers or the leadership of this messianic settlers. The war exposed the more deep layer of messianism of this group. I mean, they used to speak to Israelis about security. We are settling in the West Bank to secure Israel. And suddenly, with Gaza, we have a war, we're crying, and they're dancing. They see the redemption coming, and it's crazy. And they are ready to go now and settle in Gaza. And I'm still afraid that this will happen. And I think that the Israeli public now is much more against them, and realizing that this is not where we want to go. And this is why I think we still have hope to stop them and to turn this around. Although I don't know when it will happen.
Well, one of the things that I think you guys have shown in your report and talked about today, but that I still think a lot of people don't understand, certainly here in America, is how different this is than previous governments, right? Every Israeli government for a long time has supported settlement growth or allowed settlement growth, but both the rate of growth and how many of these are, as you were talking about, illegal even under Israeli law, is a very, very different thing than we saw under previous governments, even under previous Netanyahu-led governments. And certainly as we've talked to folks here, members of Congress and other people, it is, I think, just shocking is the only sort of word. It's shocking and it's eye-opening. And they are trying to do it, undercover while the war is happening, while people are focusing on other things. I do want to go back and ask both of you a little bit more about the World Zionist Organization and the Settlement Division. And before I turn it to you, I'll just add in a little bit, having been involved in this, the Settlement Division, it's a place where the translation is not perfect, because the Settlement Division of the World Zionist Organization theoretically does not refer to settlements in the occupied territories. It refers to also settlements that could be in what's often called, right, the periphery in the north or the south in Israel, in development towns. Historically, that was the function, or a large part of the function of that organization, was to support settlement, and they did mean Jewish settlement, but Jewish settlement in these places that were not necessarily in the occupied territory. And in fact, there have been multiple times, and I was involved in one of them, where there were decisions of the World Zionist Congress not to put any funding into settlements in the occupied territory. That there were debates and there were votes, and that was passed, and that became the policy of the World Zionist Organization, which has sadly been entirely ignored. As far as I know, I don't think it's ever been overturned. I think it's just been totally ignored. And this is an example, and Hagit and Lior, I'll ask you to say more about it in a second, but just briefly, so I can wave the election flag, this is an example of where having power in this space, winning more seats for our slate, for the Hatikva slate, and again, the link is in the chat also. If you haven't voted yet, please do. We'll send out more things. Winning more seats for our slate and for our coalition gives our parties, and I say parties because it's ultimately, parliamentary system, it's coalitional work, more power where we can appoint the people, we can appoint the leaders who are actually the ones making these decisions. So when we had more power, there was not money going from the settlement division into the occupied territories. And it was only when the right wing took over more of that power that they started doing that first sneakily, and now they just do it. So it's an incredibly important and really right there in your face example of, what is this weird thing when we talk about the World Zionist Congress and the World Zionist Organization, where you ask, we talk about those $5 billion that get spent through this process. Where does it go? Well, some of it goes into the settlement division, and whether that money is going to these illegal farm outposts or to help, say, rebuild settlements in the South or rebuild settlements in the North, is directly impacted by these votes. So, Hagit and Lior too, if you want to talk a little bit more about how does the settlement division actually work with the government as a sort of quasi-governmental body in getting money into the West Bank settlements?
The settlement division is its budget is not coming from the World Zionist Organization, but from the Israeli government. And this way, they can ignore the decision of the World Zionist Organization not to give money to settlements, which is not full. I mean, there is money that goes to the settlements, but not through the settlement division, because the settlement division is in fact a body that was established to allow the settlers to take money from the government and to play with it the way they want, without the need for a due process, for transparency, for you can do things that governments not supposed to do. So that was the idea, and this is why we have the settlement division till today. However, I do believe that had there been serious power in the World Zionist Organization, they could say, enough with that. We close down this entity. We
get
don't
rid of
want
the
to
settlement
host it
division.
anymore.
Yeah.
Although we don't fund it, we don't want to, you can establish your own settlement division, send the government to fund it in indoors, and then it will be much more problematic because there should be some legal supervision about it, etc. So that's one thing. I also think it's very important. It's also not so hard to to register and to vote to the Zionist Congress. It has become like the pocket money for settlers to do many things. We saw what happened in the Jewish National Fund, Keren HaKayemet, where they wanted to buy land from Palestinians, and I say quote unquote buy land from Palestinians in the West Bank. So the JNF gave them millions because it's like pocket money for them. It's so easy to take, and you have the right wing controlling it, then they do whatever they want with it. And so it is an important field that if you can do something about it, I encourage you to do the effort and register to vote.
Thank you. And everybody on here, as long as you are American and by that I mean live in the United States, you don't have to be a citizen, but if you are over 18 and you self-identify as Jewish, then you can go ahead and vote. And again, the link is in the chat, and you'll get more emails about it from us as well. Lior, do you want to add anything on that? And if not, also I would ask both of you, there are a couple of questions in the chat about what happens next, the protest movement, elections, etc. And, I will note for everybody here, it is, as, nonprofit charitable organizations, it is not our work at New Jewish Narrative, nor is it the work of our friends at Shalom Achshav to do electoral work. So we don't support candidates. We're not out there building a political party. But both of our organizations and all of us are part of framing the challenges that face our societies and helping to promote the messages that we want to see. And Lior, you talked about it a little bit earlier, how, at the protests, people are chanting the slogans and saying the things that Shalom Achshav has been saying for a long time. So, what do you think, what are we looking at? We know the elections are scheduled for the fall of 2026. Basically since this government's come into office, every week we talk about, okay, when might there be elections? When might there be elections? I think that's still a question of anything short of fall of 2026. But what would you add on that about elections, protest, sort of how do we, Hagit, you talked about this, it's still possible to turn this around, and, Israelis don't like the settlement movement. So tell us more about how the country turns it around.
So what the next chapter will be, what the future beholds. I don't know. I know that the dangers are real in the sense that currently this government doesn't have a clear strategy for the war. And if we look ahead without this clear strategy, it means one or two things. One is that the war will last forever, and two, that maybe there'll be settlements there at some point. Now, this has changed, in recent weeks and months. The risk of settling in the Gaza Strip, it was really high if we go back to October, November, December, and then we went to a ceasefire, and all of a sudden Israel left pretty much the Gaza Strip, not to 100%, but significantly, and then the war returned to a larger scale, and now again it seems like we're going to continue this war forever. And as long as the government doesn't provide any political alternative for Gaza, that means that the war will last forever, that Israel will constantly occupy and have a fierce war against the Palestinians in Gaza. And who knows, because we know that certainly dominant figures in this government want this policy in order to either transfer the Palestinians out and to build settlements within. So this is the real risk. The second risk is, of course, Israel's democracy. And now we are at this really pivotal point, because we thought that this was behind us, but now this, scandal with Qatar and what they're doing with the head of the Shin Bet and the Attorney General and this anti-legislation, we think that the elections will be in 2026, but who knows what kind of elections, and will they be free and fair elections, and what? So this is a real danger for Israel, and I would say. And lastly, I'll add, the annexation. This is the one thing that they're really succeeding at. And we started this in the introduction, but annexation is both, it's something that is happening. It's also a process, and it also happened. So, it's hard. Like, there's no one point that, we wish that we could say, that there's this one point that Israel said it annexed the territories, but in many ways it did. The legislation, the fact that there's ministries that are responsible for, or a ministry that is responsible for the West Bank today, that there's legislation more and more on the settlements on the West Bank, and on the other hand, there's still more to go. And the fact that Israel is now annexing, in the process of annexation, the West Bank is very dramatic. Now, we want to end this with hope, right? And as Hagit rightfully said, and you were like, what the next chapter will be. So this is the chapter that we don't want it to be. And I will say that there was one very big success in recent history, and that is the protest movement until the 7th of October. And that, largely speaking, the public of Israel managed, with civil society alone, to block the Israel from turning to a non-democratic state completely. And it was due to the protest movement. It was due to Israelis saying, we will not fight a country that is undemocratic. We're not signing up for a king. We're signing up for Israel as a democratic state. And rich people, philanthropists in Israel, or business people, said, we will not, we will take our money out. We're not here for a, we love Israel, we want to stay. But so I think that if civil society stands firm, and this is very hard because they're fatigued, because we are fatigued. But on the other hand, the risk is real. So, and now we're seeing, and if you look closely at what's happening in Israel in recent weeks, the protest movement is full on. People are protesting regularly, if not daily, and all over the country and in large figures. So, and we're seeing that they are chanting peace now slogans, and they're hugging, and they're as and and they're really distressed by the extreme right wing. So I'm very hopeful, that it's a long battle. We don't know how and when, but we're in the midst of the struggle, and there's and there's still a lot of energy to fight for the kind of Israel that we wish and hope for.
Thank you, Lior. I will just say, for everybody who is here in the United States listening to that, if that sounded like a terrifying parallel, that's because it is. And, one of the things we don't have in this country yet so far is a real protest movement on, with the kind of numbers that you all have seen in Israel for a long time now. Although this Saturday, April 5th, may change that, as there are going to be massive protests around the country. Hagit, thank you for sharing all that with us. Thank you for, more importantly, writing all of that and doing all of that work. And Lior, to you and to the rest of the team as well. I thank you. Everybody who joined us, thank you. I remind you again, you all just listened to that. You know how essential this work is. There is nobody else who is doing what Hagit and her colleagues and Lior and the rest of the team are doing. And so I urge you to please join us in helping support their work. The link is in the chat. We have emailed it to you. We will email it to you again. If you make a gift through that link, it will be matched 100%. So please do. And with that, I say thank you and good afternoon. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks.